We are in Revelation chapter 4 this morning, and the bulk of today's lesson is gonna be an attempt to describe, explain, evaluate who God is. And even saying that is ridiculous because it's impossible to do that. However, there is a reason why we are given a glimpse into God's nature. So let's quickly recap some pieces that I touched on just at the very end of last week. So again, we're in Revelation chapter 4. So I want to read verse 4. It says, "Around the throne were 24 thrones, and upon the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white garments and golden crowns on their heads." So we talked about the importance of biblical numerology and its impact, its significance behind the numbers. What would be the purpose for the number 24? John found it interesting, or found it important to reveal that to us, the readers, the Christians. So 12, we understand, is God's established plan for mankind. So here's the old law. If you follow this old law, human beings, then I will save your soul. The new law, the 12 apostles, if you follow my will, human beings, I will save your soul. So the point is, there's 24 elders representing the old law, and the new law. Also, it talks about crowns. They're wearing crowns. We discussed the idea of the crown of life. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. The crown there is not a crown that a king wears, but it's the Greek word Stephanos, which is like a wreath crown given to victors of athletic events under the ancient cultures. Also, we understand that these 24 elders were wearing the crowns, indicating that they were the representation of human beings. We understand that only human beings will receive crowns, and there's ample evidence to support that throughout the New Testament. No other created being, no angels or anything like that, is ever depicted as or promised to receive crowns. And so this is again the representation of God's plan for man, and then ultimately the human beings who follow God's plan will receive this victorious crown. Again, the crown represents something that is given to someone who has been victorious. Okay, let's continue on. Verse 5. I'm going to read a few verses here. Out from the throne come. Let me pause here. So John is allowed. He is brought into the throne room or the presence of God. Out from the throne come flashes of lightning and sounds and peals of thunder. And there were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne there was something like a sea of glass, like crystal. And in the center and around the throne, 4 living creatures full of eyes, in front and behind. The first creature was like a lion, and the second creature was like a calf, and the third creature had a face like that of a man, and the fourth creature was like a flying eagle. And the 4 living creatures, each one of them having 6 wings, are full of eyes all around and within, and day and night they do not cease to say, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God, the Almighty, who was, and who is to come." And when the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who sits on the throne, to him who lives forever and ever. The 24 elders will fall down before him who sits on the throne and will worship him who lives forever and ever, and will cast their crowns before the throne, saying, Worthy are you, our Lord and our God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and because of your will they existed and were created. Okay, let's talk about God. I'm going to try to attempt to depict what it is that I have come to see, researched. I've got this vision that I want to communicate to you about God. So, first of all, we see that John sees the throne and one sitting on the throne, and says, flashes of lightning and sounds of peals of thunder. I'm going to ask several in the audience to read some passages of Scripture. I want you to see that the very presence of God is awesome. It's awe-inspiring, but it's also terrifying. Someone go to Exodus chapter 19. And I also need someone to read a passage out of Exodus chapter 20. So Exodus 19, Exodus 20. The first will be Exodus chapter 19, verses 16 through 19. Someone read that, Exodus 19, 16 through 19.
So it came about on the third day, when it was morning, that there was thunder and lightning flashes, and a thick cloud over the mountain, and a very loud trumpet sound, so that all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was all in smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the entire mountain quaked violently. When the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him with thunder.
Okay, so just make a reference or make a note to the similarities in when God is present, and the similarities to what John recalls in the book of Revelation. Okay, I need someone to read chapter 20. So Exodus chapter 20, 18 and 19.
All the people perceived the thunder and the lightning flashes and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood at a distance. Then they said to Moses, Speak to us yourself, and we will listen, but let not God speak to us, or we will die.
Okay, I don't know why I find it to be humorous. The people were so terrified, like, hey, we ain't going up there. Okay, we're going to die. Moses, you go. So the presence of God, the very presence of God is terrifying. And the people were saying, we're going to die if we even attempt this. Now, what I'm hoping that we can see, identify, is that why is the presence of God always referenced or met with, in these contexts, sounds of peals of thunder and lightning? I don't know if it's something that just comes along with God, but rather it's almost God's very nature himself. He is so beyond anything that we can comprehend. It's just his very aura demands all of this extracurricular things that we can't comprehend. So if I walk into a room, it's just physical me, that's it. But God's greatness is far beyond our comprehension and demands all of these extracurricular, powerful, mighty, and fearful things that human beings cannot comprehend. Also, with regard to God's nature, even though he allows several men to see who he is, there's a strict warning that God gives to the Israelites in Deuteronomy. I want to read that real quick. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 4. So in Deuteronomy chapter 4, people are trying to attempt to replicate God, trying to, as they always do, make some kind of an image of sorts. And this time, God is warning them about even making for themselves an image that represents God himself. Let's start reading in verse 15. So, Deuteronomy chapter 4, I'll start in verse 15. So watch yourselves carefully, since you did not see any form on the day of the Lord spoke to you at Horeb from the midst of the fire. So he's saying, be careful, warning them to say, hey, don't make an image of what you believe I am. Verse 16. So that you do not act corruptly and make a graven image for yourself in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any animal that is on the earth, the likeness of any winged bird that flies in the sky, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, the likeness of any fish that is in the water below the earth. And beware not to lift up your eyes to heaven and see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the hosts of heaven, and be drawn away and worship them and serve them, those which the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven. But the Lord has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace from Egypt to be a people for his own possession. So God is saying, I am so far beyond your mere human comprehension of who I am. Don't even think about attempting to make some kind of an image that represents who I am. Okay, let's go to verse 6, back to Revelation. So John says, and before the throne there's something like a sea of glass. And Daniel is also recorded as having been able to witness something similar to what John is describing here. And in Exodus chapter 24, verse 10, also Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 22, let's say Daniel, Ezekiel, there is the depiction of something similar to this. So we have multiple accounts of seeing, I'm going to call it the throne room of God, and they're saying something like there's like a sea of glass, or in Exodus chapter 24 and Ezekiel chapter 1, they talk about some kind of a clear expanse before the throne. And so just something to allow our minds to wonder. Okay, let's talk about the creatures in the room. I'm going to read this one more time. 6. And before the throne there was something like a sea of glass, like crystal. And in the center and around the throne, 4 living creatures full of eyes in front and behind. The first creature was like a lion, the second like a calf, the third like the face of a man, and the fourth like a flying eagle. So if you tap into your knowledge about things that were revealed to us in the Old Testament, what do we know about creatures that are full of eyes? What was listed as creatures being full of eyes? That would have been cherubim. However, it also says that they have 6 wings. Well, the creatures that are referenced as having 6 wings are seraphim. Those are 2 different and distinct creatures. But yet John is saying these creatures are both full of eyes and have 6 wings. And so it's not valuable to us to ultimately figure this out. But some people are definitely in the camp of, no, these are cherubim. Others say, no, these are seraphim. Still others say, no, these are different creatures altogether. This is something that has never been revealed to us before. There are some commentators who say that the accounts of various prophets who are talking about these spiritual beings, they say that there's some differences because of the position in the throne room or their vantage point of seeing the creatures, that their depiction of them would have been different because their angle of view was different. I don't know. I think it's just humans trying to make some sense out of something that is difficult to make any sense out of. Ezekiel notes that the cherubim have 4 faces. So it seems as though Ezekiel's saying, this creature over here, it has 4 distinct faces. But John indicates that each creature had 1 unique face. However, all of the faces are the same. So they have a face of a lion, a calf or a bull or an ox, that of a man, and that of an eagle. So the similarities are there, but yet we don't know. What do you think the significance behind a creature being full of eyes would indicate? They're probably good at doing something in particular. That's seeing. They're really good at seeing. So let's loop back around to the fact that this is being written to Christians who are under heavy persecution. And it might give them some comfort knowing that, hey, these creatures that God has created and who worship Him, they're not missing anything. They're seeing everything, and therefore, of course, God is seeing everything. And He knows the persecution that the Christians are enduring. The fact that they are saying, holy, 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 we see that also referenced in Isaiah chapter 6, verse 2, in which Isaiah is saying, these creatures are saying, holy, holy, holy. These creatures were created to exist in the presence of God, and they do not cease to worship Him day or night, as John says. Okay, so I'm going to read 9 through 11, and then we're going to talk about what this scene would have done for the Christians at that time. So, starting in verse 9, Revelation 4, verse 9. And when living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to Him who sits on the throne, to Him who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders will fall down before Him who sits on the throne and will worship Him who lives forever and ever, and will cast their crowns before Him, before the throne, saying, worthy are you, our Lord and our God, to receive glory and honor and power. For you created all things, and because of your will they existed and were created. So, what is the significance of God revealing to John what's happening with God in the present? This is what's happening with God in the present. Well, one, even though things on earth for Christians were very terrible, things in heaven are just as they should be. Perfect, serene, powerful. So why might that give comfort to Christians? Well, let's think about the society, the context under which they were living at the time. Everything was about gods. And human beings, the Romans, even the Greeks, etc., would say the gods are at war. Or there's chaos on earth, therefore there's chaos with the gods. But it's just a reminder of, no. I am never in trouble. I am never pacing back and forth. Remember what God says, or God reveals, hey, I'm sitting in the throne. It's all good. And so the Christians are saying, our God is in complete control. Yes, things here are rough, but in heaven, they're just as they should be. God has not lost control. Number two, it should serve as a reminder to the Christians, to us today, that God is almighty and deserves our worship. For them, it's not Domitian that deserves the worship, or any other emperor or man, but it's God alone that deserves their worship. In verse 10, we see that the 24 elders are casting their victory crowns before the throne. So that's the revelation of saying, hey, even though you've given to us crowns indicating good job, well done, good and faithful servants, ultimately the elders are saying, yes, but they're acknowledging, God, it is you who gave us the victory. And so you are the ones, you are worthy of that. And the idea of casting crowns, I like one commentator that I came across to this concept of saying it's almost like a celebration. They're casting the crowns before the Lord in an act of celebration and also of worship. Almost like maybe a graduation ceremony. It's a joyous occasion, and we take our caps and it's just like we did it. Like, look at this. And so it might be a scene of celebration, but also, of course, worship to God. Let's go to the end of the book, Kevin.
One of the things that was kind of astounding to me is you have these creatures who are covered with eyes. They see everything, right? They see it. The description that I kind of get is, I don't know how to describe you this creature, but this creature sees everything. And it sees everything from a calf's perspective, from a lion's perspective, from the man's perspective, from the eagle's. It sees everything. It knows where you're at. In the midst of seeing everything, this creature is not doing something like what Job would do, bring a petition to God. This creature is not saying, but God, what about this or what about that? These creatures, even though they see and understand everything, they are praising God. They are saying, it is well. You know, and like the song says, even if everything falls apart, it is well with my soul. And I think there's a bit of encouragement that I can get from that, or that we can get from it, or they can get from it, which is God. It's not just that God sees where you're at, but even the creatures in heaven sees where you're at and knows that this is not the end of it. They understand the story. They understand everything, and the understanding that they have is God is sovereign. He's on his throne. He has the power and the authority. And when the elders saw that, they go, oh, these creatures that see everything, they in turn said, we yield to this. And we, so I think it's something impactful. There are times when maybe we might be in places where we go, I don't feel seen. Nobody sees me in my distress. These creatures see you in your distress, and in turn are praising God.
Yeah, thank you.
Not in abandonment of you, but in recognition that God holds up this in his hand.
Yeah. And to continue on that, and thank you, that was good. To continue on that, it's ultimately irrelevant for us to see who the creatures are, to understand their significance. There's a lot of material out there. As why do they have faces like that of a man, that of an eagle? But the ultimate takeaway is who's in control and who is worthy of our worship, and that is God. Go to Revelation chapter 22. So we jump to the conclusion. So we see that God has revealed this scene in heaven in which he is being worshipped and is worthy of worship. And then we go through all the material in the book, all the chaos, all the suffering, but then we wrap it up in 22, verse 9. But he said to me, do not do that. Okay, well, so who's the he and what does he say not to do? Well, let's go to verse 8. I, John, am the one who heard and saw these things. And when I heard and saw, I fell down to worship at the feet of the angel who showed me these things. So John's saying, I fell down to worship this angel. And so then the angel says, do not do that. I am a fellow servant of yours and of your brethren, the prophets, and of those who heed the words of this book, worship God. So it's almost like bookends. At the beginning, God is being worshipped and is worthy of worship. Hey, all this stuff's going to happen and take place. It's going to be crazy and terrible. But then also, hey, by the way, at the very end, worship God. The book of Revelation starts with this. I think this is important to understand as we continue our study through the book. So it starts with Jesus introducing himself. He says, I am the Alpha, the Omega. I am the one who holds the keys to death and also what happens to you after you die. So he's reassuring John and ultimately us of his power and his authority. Then Jesus discusses what's happening on earth with the churches. Essentially, Jesus is saying, I know what's happening on earth. And then he says, but also I want you to see what's happening in heaven. It's a really good, almost like a 4 chapter introduction to what I'm about to show you from here on out. I have the authority and the power. I know what's happening up down on earth. Also, here's the perfection and the serenity in heaven. It's all authority, it's all power, it's all the knowledge and wisdom to be able to now reveal to you everything else that I'm about to show you. Okay, chapter 5. I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a book written inside and on the back, sealed up with 7 seals. I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the book and to break its seals? And no one in heaven or on the earth or under the earth was able to open the book or to look into it. Then I began to weep greatly because no one was found worthy to open the book or to look into it. And one of the elders said to me, stop weeping. Behold, the Lion that is from the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has overcome so as to open the book and its 7 seals. I saw between the throne with the 4 living creatures and the elders a lamb standing as if slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. And he came and took the book out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne. When he had taken the book, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each one holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And we sang a new song saying, worthy are you to take the book and to break its seals. For you were slain and purchased for God with your blood men from every tribe and every and tongue and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom and priests to our God, and they will reign upon the earth. This concept of a sealed book is found throughout the Old Testament, I should say, in several instances of the Old Testament. So, remembering that, and if we had a full year to study the book of Revelation, we would really dive into similarities, references to apocalyptic language found in the Old Testament, because it's important to know how references are made to say, oh, this is a reference to something that Ezekiel said or that Daniel said, and we already know clearly what that reference was. Therefore, we can probably conclude that this is a reference similar to that. We're going to read several passages. Go to Isaiah chapter 29. So, the book of Isaiah, chapter 29. We're going to read 9 through 11. Be delayed and wait. Blind yourselves and be blind. They become drunk, but not with wine. They stagger, but not with strong drink. For the Lord has poured over you a spirit of deep sleep. He has shut your eyes, the prophets, and he has covered your heads, the seers. The entire vision will be to you like the words of a sealed book. And when they give it to the one who is literate, saying, please read this, he will say, I cannot, for it is sealed. Then the book will be given to the one who is illiterate, saying, please read this, and he'll say, I cannot read. Okay, so there's a reference to the fact that God has information, he has a revelation for the people, but yet he's not going to reveal it. He has sealed it up in a book. Let's go to Daniel chapter 12. Daniel chapter 12. I'm going to start in verse 1. Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. Now at that time, Michael, the great prince who stands guard over the sons of your people, will arise. And there will be a time of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, everyone who's found written in the book, will be rescued. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awake, these to everlasting life, but the others to disgrace and everlasting contempt. Those who have insight will shine brightly like the brightness of the expanse of heaven, and those who lead the many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But as for you, Daniel, conceal these words and seal up the book until the end of time. Many will go back and forth, and knowledge will increase. Okay, there's another concept of I have information, but we're going to seal up this information, and it says until the end of time. Now, this is a prophecy of the destruction of Jerusalem. Let's go to Matthew chapter 24. So, in the book of Daniel, we've read about the time of distress such has never occurred. Let's go to Matthew chapter 24. I'd like to read starting in verse 15. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then those who are in Judea must not flee to the mountains. Whoever is on the housetop must not go down to get the things that are in his house. Whoever is in the field must not turn back to get his cloak. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. But pray that your flight will not be in winter or on Sabbath, for then there will be a great tribulation, such as not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will. Unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. So, if you continue reading the entire chapter, a lot of people can say that sounds like the end of end times. The apocalypse coming down upon the earth, but it's really just Jesus saying this is going to be the destruction of Jerusalem. I'd like to share with you some writings from some first century historians and their account of the destruction of Jerusalem. This was written by Flavius Josephus, and also there's a book called The Destruction of Jerusalem, or the Fall of Jerusalem. It's a compiled account of these historians. It's credited to mainly this writer Josephus. It's worth a read. Okay, moving on. Here's what Josephus writes. As the flames shot into the air, the Jews sent up a cry that matched the calamity and dashed to the rescue with no thought now of saving their lives or husbanding their strength, for that which they had guarded so devotedly was disappearing before their eyes. Another was, everywhere was slaughter and flight. Most of the victims were peaceful citizens, weak and unarmed. And this is interesting right here, because it says that there was going to be a group saved. Jesus says, for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Now look at what is said here. By the way, I'm going to have to kind of paraphrase because the translation is not grammatically correct for us today, so I'll have to kind of translate. Now, the number of those that were carried captive during this whole war was collected to be 97,000. So, according to the historians, they said there were some people that were not killed, but rather captured, and they numbered them to be 97,000 people. As was the number of those that perished during the whole siege, was 1,100,000. So this writer says that 1.1 million people lost their lives. That aligns with what we've seen in Scripture. 1.1 million were killed, 97,000 were taken captive. The greater part of whom were indeed of the same nation, but not belonging to the city itself, for they had come up from all the country for the feast of the unleavened bread, and were suddenly shut up by an army, which at first occasioned so great a greatness among them that there came a pestilential destruction upon them, and soon afterward a famine, has destroyed them all the more suddenly. There are a lot more that I could share, but it is incredibly graphic and gruesome in nature, and it just highlights, supports that Jesus had already said this is what's going to be coming, and there's never going to be anything like it on earth. It has never happened previously, and actually will never even happen ever again. That's how complete and how devastating the destruction of Jerusalem was. There are also some accounts found through some Roman historians who say in their writings that they were in agreement with this destruction, but yet even they themselves admit this is pretty bad. And for them to say that is just an indication of even their own humanity realizing, I agree with what we're doing here, but this is, they themselves were kind of torn inside. Okay. Matthew chapter 24, verse 25 says, "Behold, I have told you in advance." So let's connect this with what we're talking about in the book of Revelation. So Jesus is saying, this is coming soon. I have told you in advance. This is not some prophecy for hundreds and thousands, hundreds of years later, thousands of years later. I'm telling you, this is coming right now. I have already told you in advance. Now, in the book of Revelation, these are all of the things that are taking place, as John says, the things which are and the things which will be. He also says these things are coming soon, which also indicates that this is not a book for thousands of years. It's for the here and the now, or the very near future. Thank you. We're going to wrap it up right there. Are there any questions or final comments? Yes?
I was wondering, in Matthew 24, where it's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, don't you think that that destruction that will never happen again was specific to the end of a covenant and the destruction of God's presence on earth in the temple? I mean, because physically, I mean, I'm sure there's been total destruction in many different situations, but it never can be comparable to Jerusalem when that's the holy seat of God on earth. That, I mean, it was the change of history forever. It'll never happen again that way. Do you think that was partially what they were talking about?
So that's a good question. So I'll give you two answers to that, which of course I think are opinion. So people will say, well, what about the Holocaust? You're telling me that's worse than the Holocaust? Or so the answer to that would be, well, number one, the Israelite nation, the people of God, the Jews, as had been existing for thousands of years before that point, they ceased to exist beyond that point. So you look at the Jews in the Holocaust, did the Jewish nation cease to exist? No. They're still with us today. But the Israelite nation ceased to exist in AD 70. So the destruction was so unbelievably complete that there has never been something like it before. Number two, you can say, well, okay, we have an account of one writer saying that over 1 million people were killed, but what about the Holocaust? What about other historical events? What about World War II, etc.? Well, there have been people that have said yes, but the destruction of Jerusalem happened so immediately that 1 million people lost their lives within a matter of days. It wasn't spread out over years and years and years, and so they say Jesus is indicating that it is so incredibly swift that there's nothing that had ever been like it or ever will happen again, because it was so completely devastating in such a short period of time. Again, I don't know, but it's a good thought. Okay, thank you.